Welcome to the Dental and Mental Podcast.
We are going to be talking to you about the business and the mindset of dentistry.
Well, hello, love. How are you?
Good. Happy to be with you.
Doing great. It's going to be a good time.
Good time. Ready to roll. Part 3.
Part 3
of
of
4.
Four, yeah.
Of
the
series. Dental
and Mental Podcast. It's good to be chatting because this particular topic is one that I feel like a lot of people can benefit from because they've already chosen where they're going to go. However, most of them think about this consistently, what they want to do differently. So part 3, the question is, what do you want to do for a living? It's a loaded question.
Well, yeah, because if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably chosen.
You probably have.
Right. The Dental and Mental Podcast, you have probably chosen because you're probably dental.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I don't think many people ever, like after you hit like 30 years old, whatever you're doing for a living for the most part has pretty much been chosen, shaped. You've created a life around it. It's pretty rare that you choose to do something differently. And the reason why I think this is going to be kind of a fascinating podcast is that you've reinvented a couple of times on this front. So give us a bit of a backdrop.
Well, I think we both have within the same profession.
Explain.
Right? So back to episodes where I've talked about my entire journey in dentistry, I've held every position that you can in dentistry. And for somebody like me who gets to a certain place and does really like the joy of reinventing and creating, I like to ask the question, what is next? Mm-hmm. But when you invest 8 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars, that question starts to narrow because it is such a binary answer, right? I either keep doing this or I quit. To the point of other things that we've talked about in the podcast, those always seem like the only 2 answers. Yeah. And I'm going to keep going back to, well, is there a third option? Is there a recreation option? And what would that look like? Mm-hmm. So from clinical dentistry to the coaching and consulting side, that was the answer to what do I do with this profession that I can use to reinvent without walking away and becoming a florist. Right?
Florist.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And I think that decision has brought me back to being able to do a lot of other things that I want, which we talked about in another podcast, which is being really supportive to you, homeschooling our kids. I also teach our daughters 3rd grade because we're in a homeschool community. So I teach 3rd grade. So there's a lot of other things that have really taken shape because of that decision.
Yeah.
And I think, so I guess the question to you is, you've reinvented a couple of times from education practice owner. You had kind of a rogue practice model in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about how it hasn't just been a standard day-to-day dentistry for you.
Well, yeah, to begin with, it was pretty boilerplate. I think I wanted what so many of us did, which is just a good associateship, like somewhere that you can kind of flourish under the tutelage and mentorship of somebody who's really good. And we all wanted that. And I happened to be very lucky to get that my first year out of school. But for a number of reasons, which we've talked about in this podcast, it did not work out on both sides of the fence. And so a year later, I was kind of without a job and knocking door to door. And I think that created a sense of urgency. And urgency is really helpful when it comes to reinvention. I think that's why so many people don't actually reinvent, is they never feel the urgency enough. Mm-hmm. The pain's never really there. But when you're like, how am I going to pay our bills? It was one thing to not quite know where I was going to land, but seeing you come home exhausted from your job, which wasn't great either, while I'm at home trying to make something work, started to really especially as a man, hit me, mm-hmm. and I didn't feel good about it. So, although I did make some pretty killer stewed carrots.
Absolutely. You are
some nice steak.
You are a better cook than I am. I'll get you fed.
Not
but
anymore.
I will get you fed, but you will wine and dine.
I can do one phenomenal dinner or 2 a month, and you'll just be consistently Delish.
We're eating the same thing, buddy, but I'm going to get those macros.
Some good tacos. Yeah. So when I finally came to the conclusion that what I wanted wasn't really out there, that associateships was probably going to end the same way. There were really no practices in New Mexico, to the point of what we were talking about in the second podcast, like kind of a desert in terms of really great opportunities. There was one, it didn't work out, and the rest of them didn't seem very good, you know? Mm-hmm. So created my own sort of bespoke approach to dentistry, which was awesome. It's kind of like Airbnb, met an associateship, I don't know, it's a very unique practice model. So essentially I would rent a practice from a couple of different friends, do dentistry my way, typically full arch or larger cases, because it was the only thing that made financial sense. But again, that was also sort of kind of moonlighting. I was doing standard stuff working at Juvie that whole time until that was profitable enough, until that model worked well enough, which was a lot of marketing and everything else. And then that was a great practice model for several years for us. I loved it. Kind of one day a week, right?
Yeah.
And I spent a ton of time on marketing and photographing cases and teaching. But then the opportunity came to go up to Vita, and I was talking to, who was it? I was talking to one of our coaching clients the other day. One of our Nexa docs. And I was talking to her about how she was kind of like, why would you give up, what you had? It sounded really nice. She's like, the rest of us are trying to get that. Like, why would you go away from that? And I actually had to think about it a little bit. I was like, why did I? Because Devin will even joke, he's like, well, you made a big mistake. In typical Dev fashion. But it's because it was another challenge for me. I do love challenges. And it also evolved beyond what I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to go up there and do one day a week of more of what I was already doing and help him out with patient load. And that just wasn't what was going to be viable.
Right.
And then I'd never taken a practice of that magnitude and size and demographic and really said, like, how do we get this off of insurance, and how do we rebrand, and how do we grow the team, and how do we, double, triple, quadruple the revenue. It was the idea of really trying to go like all out, take all of the Thrive principles that I was able to utilize in a smaller scenario. Would they work in a larger scenario? Could we do the same thing with multiple providers at a high level? That was a great challenge, and it worked. But now I'm kind of almost going back. Now I'm trying to slim my schedule down to a couple days a week, maybe one again, if we're lucky.
Yeah, that's
so. So yeah, no, you're right. There has been some reinvention on that side. Here's a question for you. There's a needle shift when it comes to choosing what you want to do. Like you said, most of us have already chosen. I want to be a dentist. I want to be this kind of dentist. I think the needle shifts that we make can either be too much or too little. I'll give you an example. Too much. A person who's like, I hate what I'm doing. I hate being a dentist. Everyone that I work with is hard. They don't listen to me. I don't like the style of dentistry I'm doing. Maybe they're working for a corporate. They feel trapped. So it's like, fuck this. I'm done with this. I don't want to do dentistry anymore. And they're really beat down. So the needle shift is very much like you've said, like throw it all away. The other is too small. It's like these little mini, I'm going to go learn a little something, go take another little CE. And it's just enough of a hit to like keep settling.
Right.
How does a dentist really make the appropriate amount of needle shift? Is there any sort of recipe for that? What questions should they be asking themselves?
There's only one question. What do you really want? Because the questions that I see people usually ask themselves are, what do I think I'm capable of? What does it's all of these analytical questions. What is the market going to allow for? Mm-hmm. What will the most important person in my life say? Like, what will they give me permission to do? And all of those questions are completely inaccurate, because then your aim is something that you don't actually want.
Right.
Right? So if you have something that you really do want, and here's the interesting thing. Anytime I've ever asked a person that, if I push them, they act confused about what it is that they really want, but they're confused on what it is that they will allow themselves to have. Yes. That is where they're confused. So they're like, well, I don't really know what I want, because the question that they're asking is, what am I allowed to have? I know I'm not allowed to have this, but maybe my significant other will support this. Maybe I can invest $5,000, but I definitely can't invest $25,000. So they start making little barters with themselves on what is permissible.
What's interesting is that you're describing is permission, right?
Right.
But I would suggest that most dentists that we know, taking courses, worked with, et cetera, they make it about practicality, not permission. And it wouldn't be practical for me to do that. It's not going to make sense to do that right now. I can't let that person go right now. Maybe in 2 years or 3 years I can do that. I don't have enough cash flow for right now. But that's actually not what practical is. That is very much them putting constraints on what they're, again, allowing themselves to see or to even try. And I think you've said this before, maybe it's on the previous podcast, that like, you don't know until you get out there and start doing the thing. Like, you actually don't know what's practically possible unless you've made the decision to cut this off and to go for this thing. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the other piece of it, though, is when they negotiate with what they actually want and then give themselves a quarter of that, right? There's no energy behind it because you don't actually want it.
Okay.
You
I guess with that.
You don't actually want it. And so it's very easy to fail at something that you don't want and then turn it into a story about how the bigger thing would have been that much harder. So good thing I didn't try for that, or else the failure would have been bigger.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess here's the example. And I've talked about this before. When I was doing my first time ever public speaking was a TED Talk. And the information, if I would have negotiated with myself, I would have started off at, say, something like Toastmasters, where I could have practiced and have gotten some public speaking behind my belt before I actually tried for the thing that I wanted, which is a TED Talk. I really wanted to do one.
Right.
I had no business applying for a TED Talk and submitting all of the things that were required to do that. But had I went after Toastmasters, I would not have had any juice behind it because I did not care about doing Toastmasters. So I probably would have failed at it and failed at it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so going for the bigger thing, I was very scared because it was on a large stage. I knew it would be posted. People would see. And so the work that I had put into it was going to be far more than anything that I would have shown up for Toastmasters.
That's a really good, I love that actually. That's a great example.
But a linear path would be, well, I really want to go for TED, but I shouldn't do that because of X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I'm going to go to Toastmasters. Then I'm going to find out I suck because I have no energy or excitement or possibility behind it. And then I'm going to turn it into a story about how I was never meant to be a public speaker anyways.
Right.
So there are very much appropriate times that if you know you have something that you want to go for, that you should go for it.
No, I mean, that's...
And that's not, I want to put the caveat because that's not to say that there aren't steps to get there. In my example, it was kind of straight to the top. It doesn't always work that way. There could have been other steps. I could have tried for it. And then they could have told me, you're not ready. Now go to Toastmasters and get better and then reapply next year. That still would have been going for the goal, but it would have been in service to the thing that I actually wanted. So I don't want people to hear, go straight for the top. There may be a linear path that gets you to the top, but when you nix the top goal and only go for the smaller one, you run out of juice and momentum really quickly because your heart's not in it anyways.
That's a huge piece. Motivation is really what's going to get you to the place. At least it's going to give you the stamina to stay in the game long enough to get momentum, which is then going to carry you to what is that you actually crave, right? It's almost like motivation, momentum, mission. Like you have to keep them in order and you've got to have something that's worth fighting for. And if you don't have that, which goes back to podcast 1 and 2 too, it's like so many people have the two binary options in their mind, which one is settling. That doesn't feel very good, but it also is not going to disrupt your life too much. The other one feels like just ripping off the Band-Aid. And it's like you only choose that option if there's nothing worthwhile here, you know?
Exactly.
And instead of saying, let me think of a different approach, recreate, reinvent, something that's going to very much challenge me. that's going to create some urgency, that's going to force me to change. You and I, one of the reasons why a lot of the docs that we work with get great results is because we force on them almost a synthetic urgency. So it could be financial, it could be time, it could be whatever constraint we choose based upon our conversations with them.
Yes.
And we will apply that on them, and they might not even know that that's what's going on. But we do that because you and I both know that when our backs are against the wall, the real Davina and the real Galen show up.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And I would love it if the real me always showed up when it was, a whisper and gentle breezes. But that's not the way we are as human beings. Sometimes you got to get punched.
Right.
To really figure out who you are. If you enjoyed this episode of the Dental and Mental Podcast and this topic resonated with you, we go so much deeper inside the Thrive Lab.
So if you too want to be copied but not replicated, come join us in the lab.
And just for you, because you listen to the podcast, if you want a full $1,200 off of the year-long subscription, just use coupon code podcast. See you then.
It's such a good thing for people to remember, especially our docs, because a lot of them, when we're in these private conversations, they'll have some sort of fear. But when I ask them to name it, they never really know what it is. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, if you really try something big, do you think you're going to lose your entire livelihood?
Right.
Is that do you really think that's a possibility? And it's like, well, no, but what if? I'm like, okay, but what if? And largely the people that we were working with or coaching don't have a lot of tangible failures in their life where they ended up homeless, right? Like they risked it all, and it's like, you don't know what a dumpster fire it became. Mm-hmm. I ended up bankrupt and homeless, and right. They don't have the experience of that. And so when you really probe into their fears, they have track records of being able to commit mm-hmm. and track records of success. And so bringing them back to remember who they are. Like, is it really a risk? You may think that it is, and you may feel that energy in your body, but do you actually have any examples of your life of really going for something and it devastating everything that it is that you know? And they're like, well, no. Okay, then do we really need to pretend that you're going to end up, homeless and bankrupt? So let's get to work.
What you said in the first podcast is actually far more accurate in terms of fear. Because you're right. I think most of the fears that they come up with about being destitute and poverty-stricken and homeless, or, completely failing as a dentist, and you get 100 Google reviews that are all negatives, like you don't even have 100 positives. You don't have any 100 reviews, period. Okay, no one's giving you reviews right now. Bigger problem. Right? These fears are not based in reality, but what is based in reality? And I never believed this until I came up against it enough times for myself. I remember David, one of our coaches, telling us this, and I remember thinking, you're full of it. But he said, you're more afraid of that bigger version of you and who that person really is. It's almost like you're more afraid of your success than you are of the failure. And I thought, I don't think that's true. But I also wasn't even very close to the successes that I would want to have. He's right, because I think, just like you said in the first podcast, there's an addiction to being a good person. And what a good person really is defined by the collective. It's defined by this no name, no face collective that society sort of told you what it is and what you can do and what you can't do. And it's really designed to keep you right here, And we feel like if we really are as successful as we want to be, if you really are that in-demand dentist and people are clamoring for you and they're coming to you, the reality is the kind of person you need to become to be that person is going to have some very clear boundaries. And they're going to have had a lot of hard conversations. And they're going to be able to say no to a lot more things than yes. And they're going to be able to say no very easily. Like you say, pass the salt. With neutrality, simple. They'll have had to say no to family functions. They'll have had to say no to some things that they wish they could have gone to, but it wasn't in the cards because something else that was more important was calling for them. Leadership and the responsibilities that they're going to have to carry, the burdens of other people, those things are actually what you're really more afraid of.
Yeah, you're going to have to say no to for people asking for money.
Yes.
Right? Like, oh, like, can you donate to this? Can you do that? Can you give your time here? Can you represent this cause? You're going to have to say no to a lot of those things that don't actually align with your purpose, mission, and vision.
100%. You're going to disappoint people. You absolutely will. You will disappoint people because you're growing at different rates, you know? And I think you're also going to find that there's an incredible amount of discipline that comes with all this. And discipline's not, I wouldn't characterize it as fun. You know, it's great. You get to see something on the other side of discipline that's incredible, but it's not an enjoyable process usually, you know?
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think crashing out is worse.
Well, by contrast, sure. But as much as I like the rewards of working out, you know, it's still hard every morning to get up out of bed when it's dark and cold and it's 5 and you're like, I guess I got to go do that thing. That's never fun for me, no matter how much I do it.
That piece in itself on the day-to-day basis may not be fun, but like going back to a prison is even worse. So, I'm
thinking about what you said at the wedding there.
But I think
when everyone's like, "How are you doing?" You're like, "Guys."
For what did I say?
You said something to the effect of, "Well, I'm skinny, so life is phenomenal. What could be wrong?" Or like something like that. It was such a great line.
Oh yeah, I was telling Dylan that earlier. I was like, you know, I'm like, live my electrolyte and protein life.
Basic needs.
Well, is it fun? I would say that it is. I think that after a certain point, it has become fun because you get the contrast of the alternative having not been fun.
So I think you're right on that point. I do think that the more aware you are of what it could be if you weren't, because you've experienced that part, by contrast, you're like, no, this is much more enjoyable. Like I like fitting in my pants. I like looking good. I like my wife being attracted to me. I like my son saying, what are you doing, Dad? Like you like those things. So I think by contrast, you're 100% right. I still believe that at 5 a.m, or 4:35, I'm not excited to get up. I'm not excited to get about the routine ever. Hasn't happened once in my life yet.
Well, maybe not, but I think but you've never been a fat person either. So you haven't. So you can say that you enjoy.
Dylan's dying in the back.
You can say that you enjoy those benefits, but you have never really had the contrast of being a fat person.
No, I haven't had, but you're thinking purely of aesthetic pieces. What I have had is my body start to really, really hurt because I haven't taken care of it. Like my gravity might not be to putting on crazy weight, but it is to being stiff and my neck dying and
yes.
my back. So
that's
my contrast.
Yeah, but when you think about it that way, you don't ever think like, oh my gosh, I'm excited to get up because I don't want to be a Tin Man. Like, fuck yeah. Like, I will never go back to being a Tin Man again.
You win. I'm going to let you win this one. I think you're right about it. You're
right?
probably right. Yeah.
You're so much happier. Like you are so happy now that you're getting all
I'm
these
always
like
happy.
Well, but what I'm saying is like when you get these new back pops or you can actually see progress in your flexibility or you haven't been sick in a really long time, like you would hate to go back to being sick every 2 months.
Well, I think that's, and not to harp on this too much, but I think that the motivation piece is still hard for me. I'm speaking for myself. The motivation in that moment is still difficult for me. Like I pretty much what I tell myself is, what I honestly tell myself is, get up, you little bitch. That's what I say to myself.
That works too.
That's how I talk to myself. Because it's what makes it work. And then I try to pair something that I like, where maybe there's like a good new playlist I've been putting together and I'm like, ooh, I'm excited to like at least listen to some good tunes while I'm doing this stupid stuff.
Right.
But the progress, which you just said, that momentum and that progress is very inspiring to me. When you start to actually see something happen, you know, this is why you and I oftentimes focus on finances for a practitioner first. Because a lot of them come to us and they might be doing okay, but there's a whole nother echelon of success financially. And it's a very good motivator. It's a very good metric for how well are you doing things from an efficiency standpoint, from a getting rid of the things that shouldn't be there. So, that's progress, and that's a very motivating factor.
Yeah. I think about one of our clients that came to us and they were at 60K months.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my gosh, if we can just sustain this, like that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now those same clients are like, oh my gosh, if we do less than 220 a month, like why even come to work,
Yeah.
And that's really fun to see that much growth, because a lot of other things, not even only the financials, but have shifted so that they can become those people.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also some naysaying around the goalposts that move, and some of it's valid, right? Where it's the age-old like contentment versus growth. Like, where do you find that balance between the two? You can hear that in them, and then saying almost like being discontent with like, oh my gosh, if we drop below 200 or 220, like it was a bad month. I remember when I sold my first case for like 18,000.
I remember it too.
You remember exactly where we were.
Yep.
And I remember like getting that text message and thinking to myself, like, that just happened, And now I'm still excited when money comes in. I'm still excited. I've trained myself to be that way, whether it's a person saying yes to maybe not a filling, but if it's like, a crown or ortho or something like that, when I see them saying yes to themselves, I'm very excited about that. But dollar amount wise, 18 is not doing a lot for me anymore. In the same way that 220 for our clients that were at 60, it does 60 would feel like a failure to them. Well, that's because as you've grown, you typically brought more people with you, and you have more responsibilities and bigger overheads and all the rest. Maybe not percentage-wise, but there's more things you're caring for.
Absolutely.
And so at Vita, like, yeah, if we have under a 400K month, Devin and I are like, what did we do wrong?
Well, your standards rise.
The standards rise. I love that you said that's exactly it.
The standards rise, right? So it's not even necessarily about the dollar amount. To your point, that's the metric that we use, because we don't have a metric for everybody's individual standards, but the financials we can use as a calibration for standards. We just hired, we hired 2 new staff members. We're hiring a 3rd, and we just made the decision this week. And I love the fact that we get to, these are people who came from other practices, who didn't like whatever the environment, the schedule, the pay, whatever it was. And they were hard workers, and they wanted something different. They wanted a different opportunity. To be able to provide that is amazing. Yeah.
That's amazing, And so when we look at it, it's not like, oh, beat ourselves up, we didn't get to the number we're supposed to get to. It's that we're very sober-minded about, like, we provide, opportunities for people. So, and it does ride on the backs of all of us doing our job correctly, which, to your point, that's part of the harder conversations you have to have. Sometimes with your teammates and your staff members, they have to perform at a certain level, because that is what keeps this engine running, so that we can all have the lives that we have, right? That collective vision. What about a person, though, who's so going back very quickly to that needle shift that's not far enough, and like you said, it's because they're not really letting themselves know or be okay with what they want.
Well, because it's disruptive.
So yeah, what's really like? What's the pattern that you see for dentists in general? What is that stopping thing? What do they need to get past?
They want to have the life of their dreams without giving up any of their comfort. They don't want the disruption.
So it has nothing really to do with hard work.
No. Oh no, not at all. These are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. They'll grind day and night. They will put in the work. They will show up. It has zero to do with hard work. They don't want the disruption. And when you have a big vision, it's very disruptive, right? Because you have to get buy-in. You have to organize a team. You have to lead. You have to structure boundaries. You have to curate your time different, your investments different. If the vision is big enough, it's going to require all of those things.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's really disruptive, and I'm going to have to disrupt a lot of people in order to bring that to life. So can I just have a quarter of it and avoid the disruption and maybe get a part of it, so therefore I'm satisfied but not disruptive?
Yeah.
And that's the that's the game that they want to play, and then they call it confusion. And then when we start having these conversations, you find out they're not confused at all. They're just trying to negotiate with themselves to not have any comforts, move backwards, and just enough excitement so that they don't bore themselves to death.
Which is such a consistent pattern that we see. And it was a consistent pattern for us too. I think a lot of it came from me, from the way I learned about money and the way I learned about going for the things that you really want. Like it's okay to excel. It's okay to be good, but there's also a limit. And that's interesting, because then it's up to the individual, like, well, what's too much and what's not too much? Where am I supposed to be? So you play this, you waste so much energy trying to bounce between these two versus just go.
Right. And we have to think about dentists largely, they're really good at a lot of things, really smart, hardworking.
Very multifaceted.
Yes. Like they have a lot of talents, gifts, and abilities, and they don't ever want to make anybody feel bad if they shine too bright.
Yeah.
Right?
What does that do? What is shining bright or too bright? I mean, maybe define shining bright and then say what that takes from, or what are they perceiving that it takes from other people?
It's the being extra, right? It's like, have a nice car, but not too nice. Live in a nice neighborhood, but not too nice. You don't want, you want to be just under the line of bringing attention to yourself. You want to go right next to it, but you don't want to cross over it, because then people start to talk.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's also so false in the same breath, right? Because think about what most of the things that you either buy or aspire to being or wearing or building, they're coming from some other place that you've seen, right? So you got motivation from somebody else being that thing, doing that thing, saying that thing, right? That is all of social media. That's all of the digital era. It's all of everything, actually, right? You're motivated by things outside of you, typically. And then you internalize and say, what is it that I want to build from this? So as individuals, we're very much inspired by other people doing really cool shit. But when it comes to ourselves, we say, well, I'm going to, take from other people? I'm going to make them feel less than capable? What is the, why is such a disresonance between those two?
Well, I mean, think about it in dentistry.
Dissonance.
And think about it in dentistry. There are not many personalities that I know of like Bob Marges. And maybe
Bob.
And maybe there are more out there, but he is truly one of the only people that I could point to that is so magnetic. And the very first time meeting him, I was like, I want to be like that. I want to be unapologetically rad. Like he's just
unapologetically
rad. Right? Like he's just cool. He's just happy. He's happy for other people. Like I think some people don't people right? Mm-hmm. Like because you do have examples of people who do it and shove it in your face or want you to feel bad or want you to feel like you're not there or less than or whatever it is. But then you have some people who people really right. And it is inspiring and motivating, and you don't feel like there's anything less for you. You feel like there's more for you because you're around them and around their energy and around new doors that they've unlocked for you. And that's really fun.
To your point of how people negotiate, which is such an interesting, I hope that everyone who's listening to this really stops to ask themselves, where am I negotiating with myself at a very low level? Right? And holding yourself back. I think what we do oftentimes, in the same vein of good person but going the other direction, making things out to be bad people, habits or traits. I think you hear, in dentistry you hear this, right? Be like, oh man, it'd be really cool to be as successful as Michael Appa. But he probably has like no family life, And so you come up with these justifications for why you would never want to go as hard as he does. You would never want to build what he built because, well, then you'd be sacrificing family and time and you couldn't possibly be a good person then, really. You wouldn't be prioritizing the right things. And this is the way we hear people talk, right? You denigrate the successes of other people because they must have given up something that you value, that you do well. And it's a way of justifying why you aren't doing what you thought you wanted to do.
Right. Yeah.
Right? There's something there that I think is actually attached to the good person piece, where we want to feel good about ourselves, which means that if we don't feel like we're moving at the pace we should be, we're not achieving what we should be achieving, instead of just hearing that as, what do I need to change? Instead, we hear it as, I'm not a good person because I didn't do it yet. So I have to tear others down or make a reason why going for that isn't such a good thing.
Yeah. Or talk yourself out of wanting what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've got one more question left.
We do. One more question.
So join us for the next question in the podcast, which will be for part 4 out of 4.
Yeah. It's going to be going. All right. See you then. Thank you for listening and or watching the Dental and Mental Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, or any others for that matter, feel free to tap that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, as well as Spotify. While you're there, why not leave us a review, up to 5 stars? And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know what topic you want us to discuss next.
If you like what you heard today and you want to be involved in the Thrive world, from coaching to courses or just to connect with us, go to thethrivedentist.com.